Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, everybody. Well, I'm super excited for this episode because not only am I finally home in Denver from the Favor event in Orlando, I'm excited. This episode has quite a few announcements. So before I actually jump into this interview that I did with Senator Kelli Stragel and Andrew Ketchel from Capital City Consulting, I have an announcement. And if you have been listening to who we have sponsoring the show, then you'll know that I've been with Hostfully, I've been with Safely, and I've been with Jetstream for quite a long time. We've had a lot of other sponsors on the show, and I'm super thankful for those relationships. I'm super thankful for the opportunity to work with them in the past. But it is a new time and it is a new era, and I'm super excited to share that we are now officially working with Minute. And if you haven't heard of Minute, then you need to check them out at minute.com. It's MINUT, minute.com, and go there because they have an amazing device that helps detect noise, occupancy, and all sorts of other security features for your vacation rental. So if you're a host with 1 to 5 properties, then just go to minute.com and you can get your devices there directly on their site with ease and a couple clicks of a button. Then, if you have more than 5, then reach out to me and let me know, and I'll send you to my contacts at Minute, or you can go and let them know that you heard this on Slick Talk, and they will jump at the opportunity to work with you. I'm super excited because Minute and I have formed this partnership recently, and it's just been super cool to work with them and to work with a new provider in the space that I've actually been using and testing out and actually really enjoy the product. So thank you so much to Minute for coming in and joining me on the podcast. I can't wait to work with you more, and it was so great to meet a lot of the Minute team at the Favor event. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's get ready to jump in because I interview Senator Kelli Stragel, who is representing the state of Florida in a lot of ways, but she showed up at Favor to present on a panel and to cover things involving advocacy and involving regulation and what this looks like from a bigger perspective, not just as an operator of short-term rentals. This was really important, and I can't wait for you to hear this awesome interview where she sat down with me and Andrew Ketchel, who is one of the lobbyists that is part of the organization and helping represent the industry. So enjoy this episode in 3, 2, 1. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin.
So, we were kind of just discussing how you advocate for things. A lot of folks in the audience that may be new to how it works in Tallahassee or in your, state legislatures. And, at the end of the day, it's how you present, how you educate, how you engage on the grassroots side, on the grass top side. And we were talking generally about kind of where we're at with vacation rental regulation in Florida. It's a complicated subject that has a long history.
Yeah.
Seems like every year we're back and forth between industry leaders and staff and members trying to figure out, is this something that we can fix? Is this something that has a solution? What is the solution? Certainly it's a little bit of a moving target as we try to tackle some of these local ordinances, but it was lively discussion with a lot of participation.
Yeah, awesome.
I'll say on vacation rentals, it's kind of a disruptor. They're really new on the scene. Not new as in the sense of right now, we've been dealing with this for years, but the law is very gray in a lot of areas. And so there's a lot of advocacy that's necessary in that vacation rental world. things that are not clear or not black and white. So in order to be effective, you need to know how to present yourself and how to present your issue to your elected officials, whether that's city, local, county, at the state legislature, and bring that awareness. So it was a great discussion, and I look forward to being able to advocate, to tell people how to advocate, because I always say you may not want to be involved in government, but that does not mean government will not be involved with you.
Yeah,
So you need to know how to speak up.
Well, so I guess my question from a advocacy standpoint, right? Like the word advocacy is not sexy. It's not fun. Everyone knows there's a lot of work involved. What is like, I guess, the key to proper advocacy when it comes to, at least in our industry? Is it consistency? Is it following the right chain of command? What is the key for it when it comes to vacation rentals and how we're kind of moving forward with regulations and professionalization on the actual operator side?
I think if I were going to give any advocacy, this issue or any other, the two key things that are important are awareness and relationship. So, and they have different phases in how you would work. You know, awareness, if someone's not aware of the situation, is not aware of what you do, not aware of the problem. And for the vacation rental, it varies from region. You can have a very closed community that all of a sudden gets one, Airbnb in the neighborhood and the whole neighborhood goes insane. You've got other areas where they welcome these vacation rentals because they don't have hotels. They don't have any other kind of housing, and they are now growing with some new attraction in our state. We saw a lot of that with COVID. People were coming down from all over the place, and we're trying to figure out places to house them, and the area just boomed. So you need to make people aware of the situation. Once you've got that awareness, and you see that, and awareness can happen in multiple ways. And when you talk about the more hostile issues in our country, that's your protesting and all that. But once you've got that awareness of the situation and the problem, then you have to be able to have relationships to work to the solution. And we talked a little bit more today on the relationship, because I think the legislature is very aware of the challenges that we're all facing with the Airbnb market. I say Airbnb vacation rental.
Oh, I know what you mean.
But VRBO, I need to put them all out there, right? So now I'm taking one. Let's announce them all with paid media, right? But anyhow, but then be able to have that relationship with your elected officials, so that it doesn't always have to rise to the level of having laws to fix everything, because that's not always the solution. Sometimes it's just a conversation with, the city official can call and say, hey, you got a lot of stuff going on at your house. Can we work this out? Things like that.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, the problem with all these issues and in terms of just advocacy generally is that when we're advocating for something, we think we're right. Like the other side can't be right. We know what we're talking about. We're in the industry. We can fix this. But then the other side comes in and says the exact opposite thing, and they believe they're right? So there's always two sides of the coin. So at the end of the day, to the senator's point, it's about building those relationships, telling the story, educating, and it does take work. It takes time. There's a lot of members of the legislature. There's a lot of local elected officials, county commissioners, city officials, and they're getting it from both sides. And so at the end of the day, it's who outworks the other person. And obviously the political winds of the day, we talked about this during the panel, they change. And things matter, regionally, to the senator's point also. These issues are a little bit easier in the Panhandle because there's not a lot of vacation rentals, hotels, traditional hotels in the Panhandle. But in other parts of the state, this is a really vitriol issue that causes a lot of people to get really upset. And so being calm, cool, collected, educating, I think are the keys to real advocacy.
When you have two sides that think they're right and they don't want to hear the other side, how do you get them to calmly and non-emotionally come to the table and have that conversation where you guys can actually hear the whole conversation on both sides, but then also come down to the point of like making a next step on the decision of any type of legislation or whatever the advocacy, topic might be?
Well, and I wish two sides was great. That would be awesome. It's not two sides, probably about 4 to 7 sides.
Okay.
You've got, regional issues. You've got size. You've got large vacation rental managers down to one person who has one. So when you go into the lawmaking world of this, the laws for everybody, whether you're managing a bunch of them or whether you're managing just one of them, you've got issues where, the issues that we've heard on what makes a vacation rental. Is it 2 weeks of a month? Well, you've got some people who it's 2 months of a year. So that's not even consistent. So there's just, I think what happens when you can get to the relationship and with the organizations like you have, where everyone comes together, there's probably a lot learned in this meeting just from talking to other people in your industry to realize that, oh, I had no idea that's what you're dealing with. That you put all that with your Tallahassee lobbyist, but the main, who knows the lay of the land up there, hired help.
We're fired up.
that they can bring in a whole nother aspect of where we've been, what we've done, what are the issues that the legislature is dealing with, what are the sticking points. So it's not just a matter of bringing two sides together. It's a matter of comprehensively having a thoughtful discussion of where there needs to be laws and what the unintended consequence of those laws are for this person and that person.
100%.
Yeah, and ultimately elected officials like the senator have to make a decision. And the decisions aren't often easy. And, to her point, the law is for everybody, right? So you're going to have to pull the emotion out at some point and make a decision. And sometimes the decision isn't made, which is why we haven't passed legislation on vacation rentals in a long time. And so there is always going to be that back and forth. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to make a decision, and that's why they're elected. So it's about getting the most out of it for the industry that we can. And that's a part of my job.
Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier, it's whoever works the hardest, right? And I love that you made that point that it's not just two sides. There's probably, like you said, 47, 50, 100, who knows? So when it comes to working the hardest and, it's getting the message out there, it's being consistent in your communication, your advertising, your overall voice, right? But what does the work involved on the back end, and why do you think a lot of people probably avoid doing more advocacy because of that work? Like what's involved on the back end for that to be?
I think this is what I do for a living, but I think it does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
It takes building relationships, maintaining those relationships. And then when they're actually in session, in committee, voting on these issues, it's a lot of educating. It's a lot of meetings. It's not ignoring any members. It's not ignoring any Democrats just because they're in the minority party. It's having those discussions. And it takes a lot of time and effort, which is why we exist. But it's often hard for us always to deliver the message. We need people from the industry to help deliver that message as well. They're the ones that can tell their story. And, because at the end of the day, if the senator is hearing from me every single time, that's great. And she, I hope, appreciates that and trusts me. But she also wants to hear, how is this affecting the industry? How is this affecting you personally?
Yeah.
And I can't tell that story. I get paid by the association to do some of this. I can help tell that story, but it's not always my story.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would also say another part of this is patience and incremental changes. When you're talking about something that's going to affect a lot of people with a law, sometimes you'll make a little change and see what that looks like and see what your unintended consequences. Because I will tell you, anytime you're making a change, you have way more people who are going to tell you how the sky's going to fall, everything's going to crash and burn, it's going to be horrible. So sometimes you push that envelope and you make that change. And I often say that's what future legislatures are for, to come back and fix we did something that just didn't work like we intended. You have to have patience in that. You're not going to fix this issue overnight because it's an ever-evolving situation within the industry, within our state, all of it. So you have to be patient and recognizing that as long as the ball's moving down the field to your direction, that is a win. And you have to have that patience to continue to pursue that to get to your ultimate goals.
I totally agree. And I was going to ask as one of my final questions, how do you guys avoid burnout from, this is not like you said, it's not overnight. So how do you avoid a burnout of the same conversations? As you said, though, you are moving a little bit forward, whether it's against or for, but how do you avoid from burnout with these conversations and the amount of meetings and education and probably more interviews like this?
It's not a matter of burnout because this is one of another gazillion issues that we have to deal with in the legislature. So it's interesting. And those of us who ran for office did that because we want to make the world a better place. We want to make our communities better. We want our, so depending on what your focus is on that, I think this industry into our state, this whole disruption of the renting out your home for a temporary basis has been monumental, life-changing, and very beneficial on both ends for everybody.
Yeah.
You've seen that with some of the other disruptors and Uber and all of the eating out issue, all the various different disruptors that are out there. So that makes it a challenge. But when you think about the long-term effects of the laws that are on the books and the problems that have been solved, considering the newness of the industry, really have made great strides. So you have to kind of stop and reflect and think of where we started and where we are.
The only thing I would add, I think that's a perfect point, is that every year it's different. So the points may be generally the same, but every year things change because policy has changed. There's new local ordinances. There's new kind of political winds of the day. So she may be hearing a very similar story, but it changes. And there's new people that are elected every few years.
Yeah.
The Senate's generally a little bit more stable because they're only elected every 4, but the House changes over quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it's new people, new staff, new issues, et cetera. So burnout can be a little bit challenging. Obviously, I do this for a living, but it is new quite frequently.
Okay, very good. Well, Senator, Mr. Kitchell, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. And we appreciate you for stopping by this awesome event. And hopefully we'll catch you again when we're doing this again next year.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week. How awesome was that? For me, that was such an exciting interview to be able to actually sit down with the senator and talk about this conversation that we have on the podcast, and not to plug back into this new partnership with Minute, but companies like Minute and companies like Safely and companies like Hostfully that participate in the back end of operations, from one-off hosts to property management companies. These are the reasons why advocacy is so important, because we do use the right tools. Whether you are a one-off host, like I said earlier, this is so important that a tool like Minute could really help step up your game in order to make sure that you are representing the industry a little bit better, with a little bit more thoughtfulness in behind your short-term rental. So this was just a great conversation for me to have as a podcaster, and to just have for the industry. I can't wait for more interviews like this. So if you loved this episode, or if you like this episode in general, please go like and subscribe, check out everything. Make sure you check out our other shows on hospitality.fm. I recently just did an interview with Natalie Palmer, who is the host of the No Vacancy podcast with Natalie. So there's a lot of other great podcasts out there, and it's not just me out there that are advocating for proper regulation and all the other stuff that goes in behind the scenes with our industry. Check it out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all again next week.